Hi everyone, Sam Camerata here. I am the workshop coordinator. Thank you so much for stopping by August's Rock Game Dev workshop. So real quick, I just want to introduce our speaker for today. Ro is a local game developer and board game member of Rock Game Dev, and board member of Rock Game Dev. He's been making games for over 10 years and primarily makes casual games for mobile web casino, where it's common to develop small games at a rapid pace. So today he's going to be talking about strategies for effective prototyping. Put your digital hands together for Ro.
Hello, everyone. Can y'all hear me?
That chat delay.
Is it working? Cool. Okay, well, let's get started then. Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about rapid prototyping strategies for game designers. A little bit about myself. Like Sam mentioned, I've been making games for about 10 years professionally. Here are a bunch of games that I worked on. As you could see, they do many of them are in the casual arena, where I've had to do a lot of prototypes, often for small mini games, often for concepts, and through it all, I've kind of feel like I've learned a lot about prototyping as a process and how to do it better. So today we're going to cover we'll do like an overview of rapid prototyping, what it is and why you should use it. We'll talk about some strategies for effective rapid prototyping, the how. This is going to be the meat of the talk. And then we'll do a live demo, a mini game jam. It'll be pretty experimental. We'll see how it goes. It might be a total mess, but that's kind of the point, right? So let's go for it. Some disclaimers. This is not an exhaustive coverage of rapid prototyping as a concept. It's a huge topic. There's way more than I could fit into one presentation, but I think it's some stuff that I think people miss often. So I wanted to highlight these strategies. There's no silver bullets. Every tip, strategy, trick, whatever is situational. I recommend thinking about it like a toolbox where you bring your toolbox to solve a problem. Hopefully, you find the right tool for the job, but there's no one super tool that does everything. And finally, this is catered to digital game designers because that's what I am and that's where my experience is. But I do think that these concepts are cross applicable to tabletop design, other kinds of design. Hold on one second. Did Discord just fail? Okay, we're good. Cool. Um, so yeah, um, cross applicable to tabletop design, other kinds of design, and even other fields. So part one, overview. What is a prototype? A prototype is a representation of the final form. It is usually cheaper and easier to make than the actual thing. It is a way to answer questions and learn stuff about the design before going into the full investment. You see here Zoolander's looking at this building. This is before they actually built the building, or where he learned that it was small. What is prototyping? It's good to think about this in the lens of the iterative process. On the left here, you have the waterfall design process where you start, you design, you implement it, you go into post-production, and you finish. As you can see, it's a very linear process, and it's problematic because if you were late in development and you realize something has gone wrong or you're missing your target, it's very hard to turn around because of how much you've invested. On the other hand, the iterative process is much safer. It takes place as a series of implemented chunks where you design, implement, playtest, and evaluate small chunks of the idea at a time. And this is a lot more flexible because at each cycle, you have a learning opportunity. You can evaluate your playable game idea, decide if you're going in the right direction, and course correct. You go through the cycle as many times as you need to until you have something really strong, and then you're done. What is rapid prototyping? So, rapid prototyping is pretty much just prototyping, but fast and probably sloppy. Now, the goal is not to be sloppy, of course, but the idea is to let yourself be a little messy in order to go faster. What is effective rapid prototyping? I like to think of it as an engine where you have this cyclical, iterative process. You put a question in to the engine and you get an answer out. Um, and this is kind of like what makes it useful, right? Is that you want to be able to get answers for your questions in a cheap way. What makes it effective? First, you want to have a good question that's worth answering. Second, you want minimal effort to reach that answer. That means that both going through one cycle is quick, as well as you want to minimize the number of cycles it takes to get to a good answer. And finally, a reliable method and result. That means that you trust this process so much that you know putting in a question, you're confident that putting in a question will get you an answer. Now, it may not be the answer that you expected, but it is an answer, and hopefully one that teaches you more about your prototype and where you need to go next. Why use rapid prototyping? So I like these visualizations. As we saw in the diagrams before, waterfall is very linear. You could think of it as a rocket where you can aim the rocket in a direction, but once you launch, you're committed to that direction, right? So in this example here, they kind of, it's a little hard to see, but they kind of thought the target was here. They launched their rocket, they went through a full development process and launched version 1.0, the initial release of the game or product. And then they realized, oh no, we're not quite where we thought we needed to be. Targets maybe over here. They did it again, version 2.0. Up, one more time. Here we go. We finally hit our target. It's now version 3.0, but you could see that was very costly. On the right side, as an alternative, agile or iterative or prototyping is a lot more like driving a car. You can course correct as you go. Each one of these nodes is a single, it could be thought of as a single major milestone or iteration. So you have a target in mind, you minimize your scope to a small chunk, you go through the whole process, you end at evaluate, say, okay, how do we course correct? Another cycle, evaluate, another cycle, evaluate. Each time you have an opportunity to course correct, like as you would in a car when you're like starting to drift off the road, right? With the goal of getting to success on or before version 1.0. So you can see it's a much better method because you can constantly be adjusting, and ideally you use way less resources than you would have in the waterfall process. Why use rapid prototyping? So here's a few use cases. One is, what we call finding the fun. And this could be you have an idea, but you don't know if it's fun. It's risky. It's a new idea. You want to try it out and see if it's fun. Or this could be a spaghetti in the wall kind of thing. Throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks. And even if only one tiny part of it is fun, you can follow that fun in your next iteration. Experimenting with risky ideas in a safe context. This is really important as because it's cheap and quick to make a prototype. By definition, it is a great place to try out risky things because even if things go horribly wrong, you can still throw it all away and start over, and you haven't lost much. You haven't lost 3 years of development, right? You can use prototypes to pitch a concept to others. Usually, you're trying to convince them of something, right? Maybe you're trying to get some teammates to join you on your game idea. Maybe you're trying to pitch it to a publisher to get investment and support. Maybe you're trying to pitch it to a bunch of investors to get money to fund your game, right? In all these cases, the prototype is a cheap way to essentially convince people to invest more into your project. And likewise, they get to see something in action and know have an idea of what they're investing in before they put their investment in. You can use prototypes to test the water for interest, a focus group play test. You could do some market research. The basic idea here is that you want to know if your game is worth making. You don't want to spend 3 years working on a game just to find out that there's no market for it, that no one will buy it. So, good idea to use a prototype to test the waters. And finally, you can use a prototype to answer a specific question. We talked about doing this at the beginning, but you can also do it in the middle of development. Might have this large game that is full of features, it's very complex, and there's a lot of variables. Well, you want to be like a scientist and isolate your question. So you could take your question, go off to the side, make a little prototype, find out what the answer is, and then bring the answer back into your big game. But don't take it from me. Let's talk about some famous examples. This first one is Narbacular Drop. It is a game where you place these gates along the wall or along the floor, and you can use your mouse to kind of drag them along. It's a little bit of a clunky interface, but the core concept was strong. And Valve recognized this and hired the whole team, and this game went on to become portal. Here is an early prototype of Jonathan Blow's braid. Jonathan Blow was trying out the time manipulation and physics of his game idea, and he did it in a context where he didn't have to have nice polished art. He actually has said in the past that the game was already fun at this point. He already had some cool puzzles. Many of the puzzles from this prototype ended up in the final game. But the difference is that once he knew it was fun, he was able to go hire an artist and go develop the full thing. And finally, this is a fun one. This is actually an early prototype of Breath of the Wild. So you might not recognize it because Breath of the Wild is a 3D open world game. But they decided that they wanted to test out the riskiest part of their concept, the physics and chemistry system. See, Nintendo has already made a bunch of 3D Zelda games. They know they can do it on their own. And they didn't want to go through the trouble of building a whole new 3D engine for the Switch um, just to test out this idea. Rather, they tested it in something that looks a lot like classic Zelda, where they were able to test out things like, oh, wood burns from fire. Oh, things can float. Oh, you can put out fire with water. All the objects have different kinds of properties, and there's cool, interesting, emergent interactions that come from it. They also were able to prove with this prototype that they can set up these problems for the player to solve, and the player could be creative in how they solve it because there were so many different options. Once they found out they had something strong, they brought it into the main game. So that's part one. Are there any questions at this time? I'll give it a second for the Twitch delay. Cool. Okay. Well, I will keep going then. So this is part two, strategies for effective prototyping. This is going to be the meat of the talk. So let's just do an overview first of all the different strategies. There are 10 of them.
Ooh, I'm sorry. There's actually a question that just came in.
Oh, great. Hit me.
Yeah, so from the chat, is it wise to use an unpolished prototype to pitch to investors? Might a vertical slice be better suited to that?
Yes. So for potential investors, because you're trying to convince someone of something, I do agree that polish is a good thing and vertical slice is a great idea. We'll actually get to that in the strategies, but vertical slice is a way for you to limit your scope so much that you have an opportunity to polish this small thing because polish is time consuming. However, you wouldn't usually do that until you first prove to yourself that the idea is fun. So when you're proving it to yourself that it's fun, you wouldn't polish it, but you could then polish it afterwards in an iteration to convince investors. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Cool. Anything else? Cool. Okay. Strategies overview. Start from curiosity. List your constraints. Solidify your concept. Identify the risks. Set clear goals. Choose the right tool. Consider a throwaway. Avoid unnecessary challenges. Minimize the polish. And finally, fail fast. Now, I know this is a lot to throw at you at once and you have no context yet, but I wanted to give you an overview of kind of the roadmap of what we're going to go through. And I also decided it'd be fun if we did it in the context of a specific prototype. So recently I had to make a game prototype called DJ Scratch. It was actually for work. And we're going to essentially go back and forth. We're going to talk about a concept and I'm going to show you how it applied to DJ Scratch. And we're going to go back and forth so that way you can see this prototype growing through this 10-step process. Cool, let's go into it. Start from curiosity. There's many ways to brainstorm ideas, and that's kind of outside the scope of this talk because there are experts on brainstorming. But the basic idea is you want to generate as many ideas as you can, as diverse as you can in a small amount of time. One approach I like is the bottom-up design method, or mechanics or gameplay driven. This means you could start with something like a twist or a variation on a genre that you like. That would be something like how MOBAs started. An evolution of gameplay that you love. You could find something that you feel like has become stagnant, and you could try and find a way to evolve it. A new, never before seen mechanic. So this would be something like the time moves when you move mechanic in Super Hot, or the portal mechanic in Portal. Any of these are valid starting points, but the idea is that they're all gameplay or mechanics centered. And then you build up, that's what we call a bottom up, build up the dynamics, the interactions that the players have to deal with, and finally, the player experience on top of it all, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing as they play. So you start from this core and you work up. This is a very common way to make games. Another way is a top-down design, a theme or aesthetics-driven approach. Maybe you have a story that you want to tell. Maybe you have a feeling you want to capture. Maybe you have an idea you want to express. You could start from this more experience-oriented starting point, and you work your way down to find the mechanics or systems that you think will help you create this experience. So you're going in the opposite direction, but the end goal is still the same. In both cases, you're trying to create a player experience. To give some examples, let's talk about the Narbacular Drop one. Narbacular Drop actually had a theme in its old school prototype. It was something like Circles of Hell, and when Valve hired the student team, they actually stripped all that stuff away and started from scratch. And they stripped away all that Circles of Hell stuff, and now they built on top of it the lab and GLaDOS and the experiments, all the stuff that we know and love, cakes being lies and all. But that stuff wasn't there at the starting point. The starting point for this game in both cases was the mechanic. A good example of top-down design is sorry, that's my dog. Is Spider-Man, the new one by Insomniac. So in Spider-Man, you might remember all the reviews saying things like, feels like Spider-Man, web slinging feels so good, what a Spidey feel. I have my Spidey sense when I play this game. And that's because it's not their job to have to articulate what's actually happening. But for a designer, it is a good idea to start with a target experience and build down, how do we make this happen with our mechanics? And they had to work on their web slinging mechanics with lots and lots of details to figure out how to recreate that experience, because they still kind of knew what it was supposed to feel like. We've had so much of Spider-Man in our culture that we've all kind of imagined being Spider-Man, and we have this sort of instinctive understanding of what it's supposed to feel like. So that was a good starting point because it guided all of their decisions as they iterated on the mechanics. To apply this to DJ Scratch, I was actually given a concept here. So I didn't get to brainstorm myself so much. I was given the concept of Pop the Lock, which is a well-known casual game hit where you have the spinning dial and you have to tap when the dial lines up with the dot. And it's that simple. You keep doing it over and over again until you miss. With a DJ fantasy, the idea was essentially Pop the Lock, but DJ themed. And by the way, as a designer working professionally, you will often be in this scenario where you are given some initial idea and it's your job to run with it and make it shine. So that's what I was given here, and it was exciting. Number 2, list your constraints. This is a diagram of trying to find a project or a life work that's good for you by using these different kinds of constraints to narrow it down. So there are always constraints. What that means is that whether or not you are aware of the constraints, they are there. So you might as well list them out, be aware of them, and work them into your design. Constraints are your friend. You can use constraints to narrow down the design space, and it actually makes things easier because then you have less options to choose from to solve your problems. Consider all kinds of constraints. Technical constraints, what you can actually do with the current tech. Design constraints, what kinds of things to be fun or unfun. Business constraints, does this actually have a market? Do you have the money that you need to make this thing? You could separate your hard and soft constraints too. I find this very useful. A hard constraint is like, I have 3 months, and that could be because of your budget. Maybe you're running out of money in 3 months. That's a hard constraint. A soft constraint is something like, I've always wanted to make a puzzle game, or I like RPG progression systems, right? Those are things that maybe you care about, but they're not necessarily set in stone. You can change them. They are flexible. To apply this to DJ Scratch, we had a few hard constraints. The gameplay must resemble Pop the Lock. The theme is a DJ or a party. And one more constraint that I didn't mention before, the target platform was something called Arcade Win, which is a skill-based cash gambling context. That means it's competitive, skill-based, and that means that there's high stakes because there's actually money on the line. Now that changes things a lot. It's a lot different than Pop the Lock, where your only goal is to just zone out and have fun. Soft constraints. So I actually derive soft constraints from the fact that this is an Arcade Win app. And these are things that I thought were necessary to make this game fun in this context. Scoring should be accessible yet granular because it's competitive, right? You want the players to understand how scoring works, but also have some depth in there, some granularity, so that they can actually express themselves and improve over time. You always want to have a chance to win up to the very end because it stinks in any competitive context when the game is over right in the beginning, right? Whether it's sports or gambling or whatever, you want to have a chance all the way up to the end. Skill is greater than luck. There's a little bit of luck in, for example, where the tone arm is placed, but primarily it's a skill-based game, and you want the player to feel that it was their skill that mattered. And finally, minimum time for a match. I'd guessed 30 seconds based on other games I had seen. Later, seller, the client, came back and told us started with a minute. Number 3, solidify your concept. Once you have your curiosity and your constraints, you could develop it into a game concept. So this is what we're trying to separate concept from like something you're interested in, right? A game concept is a better starting point to start building. So an interest is something like, it's interesting how we see 2020 as this onslaught of bad events. I think it's kind of interesting, maybe a little funny, maybe a little scary, maybe more so scary. A concept is a tower defense game where you must survive 12 waves of threats themed to the months in 2020. So like maybe in March you get, the pandemic, and in April you get murder hornets or whatever, and you have to survive it in a tower defense context. This might be the worst idea for a game ever, but the idea is that there is a goal and there is conflict. That's what a concept needs. A clear goal and conflict for the player to go through. I do recommend some light documentation. I know that the philosophy of this talk is, oh, just get in there, start prototyping, figure it out as you go. But I actually think that if you're going to invest a lot of time in something, why not take a second to jot down some bullets? You can capture your ideas while you're excited. You can run through thought experiments to flesh out your ideas. I find this very useful, especially when I'm like away from a computer and I can't start prototyping right away. I just want to think through what are some, because sometimes you could find problems right away. And the idea is not to shut yourself down, but just to kind of be aware of what might happen. But be very careful. It's important that you do not over-design upfront. What that means is that it's very natural for us to get excited about a design idea and just dive in, start fleshing out the story and the mechanics and all the items and all the levels and all the quests. And that's great. It's great that you're excited. But if you are building something that is innovative or new in some way, you first want to prove that it's fun. Because otherwise, you are building all of your design on an unstable foundation. And that is very risky because you'll have to throw it all away. You might even become attached to all the stories that you wrote. And that would not be great if you have to ditch it because your gameplay is not working. To apply this to DJ Scratch, our goal is score as many points as you can. Simple. Theme, like I said, DJ. So the lock in Pop a Lock becomes a turntable. The target becomes a tone arm. The gameplay is tap when the disc target aligns with the tone arm. Difficulty and points increase over time. Keep tapping until you miss. Really simple. It's literally Pop the Lock, but DJ themed. And if you can start seeing some problems with this concept, we'll get to that. Identify the risks. What are the risky parts of your idea? What are the design risks? What are what might not be fun or might be risky? What are the technical risks? What is hard to build about your idea? What are the market risks? Is this idea have a market? Ask other people for input. It's okay to not know. If you are excited about your idea, there's a good chance that you don't see the risks in it. So it's okay to pitch it to someone else, even like just your friend or something, and get a quick take. What do you think some risks are with this idea? You'd be surprised what they can see. What has not been tried before by other games. This is important because things are risky until they're not, right? I mean, Pokemon Go was a crazy risk. No one, Pokemon itself as an IP was not a risk, but the concept of an AR game where people have to get up off the couch when they can already be catching Pokemon from home was a huge risk. And the fact that it paid off was amazing, right? Um, Now that they tried it, there was a bunch of followers. Another example would be something like maybe Spelunky is a better example. So Spelunky was the first, at least that I know of, successful roguelike platformer. And it is a game that at the time it had never been done before. But once Spelunky proved the viability of that idea, now there's tons of roguelike platformer. I'm actually making one. So it's not as risky to make a roguelike platformer anymore because it's been proven. Then you can adjust the concept as necessary. You know what the risks are, so you should adjust the concept if you need to. And let's bring that back to DJ Scratch. The design, it's too punishing. I was worried that it was too punishing to lose right away because in Pop the Lock, you tap until you miss. And it would really stink to bet real money, like bet $10 on a match, and then just because you just happen to miss tap on the first tap, you've lost your $10. It'd be over in like a fraction of a second, and it would be really, really bad feeling, right? Technical constraint or risk was that I never worked with these technologies before. CellerX, Node.js, Webpack, I had to learn them. And it was hard to like deal with both that design risk and the technical risk at the same time. So I adjust the concept. What about a fixed series of rounds like bowling? Maybe you have 10 rounds and each round you score as much as you can, like in bowling. And this way you have a fixed minimum amount of time to complete the whole game. And then by the end, um, you have some kind of total score, but you still have a chance to come back even in the 10th round. Set some clear goals. What is the goal of this prototype? What is the question you are trying to answer? What does success look like? What is the minimum scope required to achieve this goal? And let me just talk about this for a second. So essentially, you have a question that you're trying to answer, and there's no point in even doing a prototype unless you have a question. So once you figure that out, um, hopefully you know what success looks like and what the answer looks like. And then you could determine what is the minimum amount that I have to do to answer this question. And you should just do just that and nothing else. You don't need to build the whole game yet. You just need to build what is needed to answer the question. Trying to make a multi-purpose prototype is tough. You want to think like a scientist. Isolate the variables. Isolate the part that's risky and focus on just that and prove it before you build the full game. To apply this to DJ Scratch, here are design goals. We want it to be fun and tense throughout. We want satisfying match length. We want it to feel fair, skill-based, and clear. And what that means is that you want to feel like your skill is the deciding factor, right? And that you didn't get cheated by, bad luck. And players can recognize their improvement over time. That means that they performed, they saw their score, they tried something different, they got better, and they saw their improvement through their score going up. So the minimum scope, this is where I had a little bit of a problem. I wanted to first this was actually my first week at the job. So I just wanted to make something quickly that showed that I could make something. So first I just started with Pop the Lock, Infinite. Keep tapping until you miss. And I made this mode number 1. I got this working just to get the idea of DJ Scratch, Pop the Lock, but DJ themed. But I also was aware of those risks about the losing too early thing. So I also built 2 more modes. I built Infinite Rounds mode, where you keep going with a series of increasingly difficult rounds. And I built the Fixed Rounds Bowl, the bowling idea, right? So I built these 3 modes, and I tested them. And this was the way we were able to try out different things and variations of the same idea and get feedback and kind of know where to go next. So at this time, before I go to the next step, I just want to take another second to pause. We're about halfway through the strategies. Are there any questions at this time? going to take that as a no. Cool. Okay. Then I will keep going. Okay. So the next one is choose the right tool. So there are more tools now than ever. As you can see on the left, I've listed quite a few tools. These are just a few of them that are out there. I listed them kind of in increasing from bottom to top technical complexity. This is very subjective, but you can of course make something on paper that is clearly the least technical. All you need is some paper materials or some objects you find around your house, and you can try out your idea. This is good for like systemic ideas mostly. It's harder to test something that's physics or Twitch based. That you probably want a digital prototype. Scratch is a well-known tool that kids use that you can literally drag and drop, logic and start building a game. It's really, really cool. And then as you go up, it gets more complicated in terms of the kinds of things you can do. Unreal is used to build things like Fortnite and Gears of War and stuff. So the idea is that there's more tools than ever, and it's easier to make a game than ever, right? But that doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. Technical skill is not required to make a game. I really want to stress this. You can make a game, or you can make a prototype at least, just by having this paper option, just by having stuff around the house. But it does empower you to have technical skill, of course, because you have more options. If you're willing to learn Construct 3 or GameMaker or Unity or whatever, you can use all those tools to make your prototype, and that will give you more options. But that said, you can always team up if you need to. Like, no one says you have to be the coder. You can find someone who likes coding, team up with them, lift each other up, and build something really, really cool. When in doubt, stick with what you know. So if you have a tool that you've used and you like it, if you are in a scenario where you need to prototype something, I recommend just sticking with the thing you already know. That said, you need to learn things to know things, right? So there is the flip side, which is sometimes it's good to take time to learn something, and you can use a prototype. You can go into a game jam with GameMaker and say, okay, my goal of this particular game jam is to learn GameMaker. And that's fine too. That's actually, it's a great way to learn something. But that is a different goal. So I just wanted to kind of separate that out. To apply this to DJ Scratch, it's pretty straightforward. I was required to use CellerX, that was the client's platform, and I chose Phaser 3, which is a web framework, because that interface with CellerX, it was a web-based platform, and I'd used Phaser 2 in the past, so it wasn't a huge jump for me to use Phaser 3. Consider a throwaway. A throwaway prototype is a prototype you can quickly make with the intention of ditching it and starting from scratch. Some pros of this approach: it's lightning fast, laser focused. You have permission to be messy because you're going to throw it away, right? So mess is not going to hurt you later. You can ignore hard problems because you have this isolated purpose. Worry about it later. But some cons. One is you have diminishing returns. Because you're moving fast and loose and you're being messy, your code can get kind of tangled, and that could be a problem down the road. Where if you keep working on this throwaway prototype and you invest too much in it, that tangled stuff is going to make your productivity go down over time, and eventually it's going to be hard to add something to your game. And at that point, you might as well have thrown it away, right? It also makes it that switching is a scary bump, right? Switching to the next game or the next prototype. This actually happened to me on a past work project where we had made this prototype and pitched it to a publisher successfully. And that prototype was very, very polished. So, the stakeholders all liked that prototype. So it was really hard for them to handle when we moved to the new main code base, started from scratch essentially with a new engine. And all of a sudden we lost all those polish gains. And it was really hard for them to handle because it felt like moving backwards. So you have to be really careful. If you spend too much time on a throwaway prototype, you're going to run into these kinds of problems. You want to just do it quick and go to the next thing. To apply this DJ Scratch, on the design side, we went in with a throwaway mindset. So that meant I actually ended up using the code that I wrote for the phaser side of things, but I went in loose and I was expecting to maybe throw it away. So I was uninhibited until I needed to be. On the technical side, however, I actually did a quick test in CellerX, and I just made like a little game where you tap the logo to earn points. It was like the phaser logo, and I would just tap, 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 or click, 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 and the points would go up. And I just wanted to make sure that the platform worked with CellerX, and that was a great way for me to isolate that problem. Number 8, avoid unnecessary challenges. So some common game dev problems have already been solved by other people. So you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? People only really care that your game is good. You don't get brownie points these days for making a game yourself. I'm sorry for you to hear that, because the market is overcrowded already, and there's tons of people making games when small teams are by themselves. At the end of the day, people want to play good things. If you made it yourself, great, but you're not going to get extra points or extra money for doing it. I mean, I guess other than rev share, but still, um, you know, with very, very rare exceptions, you're not getting extra attention for that. What you can do is build off tutorials and templates. You can borrow source code. You can use free and open source assets like opengameart.com, or Unity has the asset store. There's some free assets on there. These are all ways for you to get in there and start building things and not have to worry about all the details. For me, this is really handy because I'm not an artist at all. And it's very time consuming for me to build art. So I'm incentivized to either just use squares and circles or to grab assets from the asset store. If your prototype is focused on what is new, then don't waste precious time on what is tried and true. To apply this to DJ Scratch, borrowed working solutions from a past Phaser 3 prototype that I had made. I actually did turn out to have messed in Phaser 3. I had some working things like text flashes, so I just took them. I downloaded a Phaser Webpack template. Like I said, I didn't know what Webpack was, so someone had put together. Actually, I think Phaser, the company, put it together where Webpack and Phaser were worked together into a template, and I was actually able to build everything from there. It was great. Number 9, minimize polish. So, someone had asked about this earlier about when is the right time to polish. So, the pros of polish is that you can draw attention to key details in the design. And that means that if you have like a cool new mechanic that you're trying to show off that you want people to pay attention to, you could spend more time polishing that mechanic. You can use the polish to help pitch a concept to non-game devs, investors, casual gamers, etc. Because oftentimes, if they're not experienced with game design, they're not going to see the beauty of the system the way you do. And remember that you're already invested in your idea, or you wouldn't be making it. So it makes sense that a little bit of polish to smooth that over, to kind of reel them in, is a good thing for pitching. But there's a lot of dangers to polish too. The biggest one is that it's time consuming. It takes so much time to do polish. That's why, AAA games spend so many millions of dollars and have so many thousands of teammates, because it is just that much work to make something at that level of polish. And if you're making a prototype to try something out, you don't want to spend a lot of time polishing. Polish is also infinite. The finish line is fuzzy. They say the last 10% takes 90% of the time. That's what that means, because the last 10% is trying to get it from good to great, and you're going to spend all that time polishing. Another way to think of it is games are never finished, they're shipped. And what that means essentially is that you can polish a game forever. You can always make it prettier. You could always make it cooler and smoother and slicker. But at some point, you have to draw a line and ship the thing. So yeah, just be careful about that rabbit hole when you're prototyping. And finally, polish can mask crucial flaws in your gameplay. In the same way that it helped smooth over things for the investors, it can also block flaws from you, essentially mask the flaws from you. And that's bad, because you want to be able to see those flaws so you can fix them earlier before you've built more and more on that faulty foundation. When polishing, you should strive for good enough. And that sounds like a weird thing to say in a career where, or a passion where you want to be doing the very best. But really, when you're prototyping, just do what is necessary. Consider the vertical slice. And what that means is you could do like one level or one encounter, and this lets you scope way, way down so you could spend more time on polish. Don't try to polish a large prototype of a large game. And consider oiliness over juiciness. So these terms are kind of fun. Oiliness means it is the reduction of friction. You want to smooth out things that are getting in the way of understanding your game, um, of players recognizing and understanding how to do the cool thing that makes your game cool. You want to remove that kind of friction to make a really straightforward experience that is the kind of experiencing you're going for. Juiciness, on the other hand, is all the extra stuff. It is the pizzazz, the splash, the noise, the screen shake, the bursts of fruit in Fruit Ninja when you slice the fruit in half. All that kind of stuff is great, and you want it in your game, but it's not necessary. That's not necessary to prove your idea. To apply this to DJ Scratch, as you can see, here's a little GIF of my first prototype. I did almost nothing. Let's be honest. I just did the bare minimum to make this look like a disc or record of some kind. That gray bar, I mean, you would only know that it's a tone arm because of the context, right? I did put like a pink background and some neon text because I knew I would have to eventually figure out text outlining. And I guess probably the most polished thing, if you can call it polished, is that little perfect text thing that floats up. And that was probably good because I wanted to make sure that people understood that the accuracy of their hit mattered. So that was kind of cool. Fail fast, our final strategy. Faster, tighter loops means more learning in less time. We talked about the iterative cycle. And so it makes sense that if every evaluate step is a learning opportunity, then the faster you go through that loop, the more learning you get to do. Like the scientific process. Do not be afraid of failure because failure gives you the most information. You just want to it's okay to fail as long as you fail fast. If you spend the entire development time failing, that's a bigger problem. Ideas are imperfect. The flaws were already there. And I really want to stress this. Whether or not you prototyped it, the flaws were there. The prototyping just revealed the flaws. So always keep moving. If you get stuck or discouraged, just look for a small win, just make something unrelated and then flip back to the main thing. Because you want to be moving so you can be getting information at a fast rate, and that's going to really inform your development. To apply this to DJ Scratch, I'm just going to show you a brief prototype. I talked about the demos that I had made. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring those up in time, the old demos of the 3 modes, but what I can tell you is that they all kind of had elements that worked and didn't work. I told you about the 3 different modes, the infinite mode and the fixed rounds mode. Many people liked the stakes, the tension of the infinite mode, but other people, like myself, liked the fairness of the fixed mode. So I actually ended up with something a little different. Oh, here's a smiley face for you. I'm just going to pull it up real quick. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Mute this. So I ended up with something a little different where now it's time-based. Many of these competitive games were time-based already, and I was concerned about time because how can we make it work with this concept of keep going until you miss? So what we ended up doing is that we added a timer, but what happens is that you're trying to score as much as you can. As you go, you have like a run of like a streak of successes until you miss. When you miss, or sorry, as you keep going, you unlock a 2x multiplier. See, I have a 2x bar. And then eventually, I'm going to get a 3x bar. There we go. So your score over time is increasing as you go through your streak. But if you mess up, the time freezes and you count over and you start over your streak. So you get an opportunity cost thing that's going on. So you're incentivized to not mess up, which is great. What I also added, as you notice, my time has run out, but I'm still going. After the buzzer goes, you get to keep playing until you mess up. And this actually worked really well. the stakeholder said, oh, wow, this has a lot of tension because I'm like playing after the buzzer. It's kind of like, when Jordan's in the air already, or like the ball is flying from half court and, you're just wondering what's going to go in at the buzzer, right? Oh, there we go. I'm out. And then it says time's up. You get your points. Great. Okay. So this concept was very popular, and it was like, this is the direction we need to go in. So I took this and I polished it more, and we're still working on that, but we'll have a shipped game pretty soon. It's pretty exciting. So that's an example of how we were able to iterate, but it was only because I was able to fail fast. I made that first mode in about a day or two, maybe one day. I made the next two modes by the end of the week, and then I made that last iteration the beginning of the next week. So we knew by a week and a half into development, okay, this is the direction we want to go in, and we had made 4 different modes of gameplay. That only worked because we went so fast. So let's talk about a live demo. Actually, let's take a quick break. I'm gonna get some water, and if anyone has any questions, this is a fantastic time. Cool, thanks. Yeah, why don't we actually just take like a quick 1-minute break? I'm just gonna grab some water, and then we can start our live demo. Okay, I'm back. Are there any questions? Cool. Cool, so let's get into a demo. I would like this to be interactive if possible, so I'm gonna keep the chat open on the left side, and I'm gonna try and work in input from anyone who's here. So I'm going to open up Unity, and we're going to make something together. And I want to actually apply those steps that we talked about to a prototype. So this is going to be some fun. Why don't I bring this here? So here are our 10 steps again. I did switch curiosity and constraints. And the reason why is I just wanted to start with some constraints. So we're going to make a game together really quick. We're going to use Unity. It's going to take us about 20, 30 minutes. This is our live demo. And it's going to be really, really rough, but that's okay. That's the point. Some constraints. I'm going to use Unity. It's going to be 2D. We're going to have 1 to 2 simple interactions. I'm not going to have any sort of AI, in the sense of the word. And we're going to do a top-down starting point because that's actually kind of easier for this kind of quick experiment. Finally, I'm going to ask for suggestions from the chat, but ultimately, I'll make a call at some point just to keep moving, if that's cool. So I hope you don't mind if I'm a little bit of a tyrant, but this is just for the sake of keeping this clean. So yeah, those are our constraints. Start from curiosity. Why don't we actually start with some random generated words? So I'm going to do random word generator and say 2 words. Should do 2. I'm actually going to do 1 word. Should I do 1 or 2? Just seeing what looks better. Let's do 1. Okay. So I'm going to hit the generate button, and we're going to do this a few times, and we're going to try and brainstorm a bunch of random things for each of those ideas. Let me get the Twitch thing open just in case someone's here. Generate random words. Okay, indoor. So we're just going to kind of do word association. when you come up with indoor, if you have an idea, just shout it out if you're Noah or Sam, and you can, or just post it in the stream chat. So we have indoor. What do you think of when you think of indoor? Some things I think of is kind of like, it's raining outside, right? Maybe you are reading a book. It's kind of like a well-known indoor activity. Maybe you're playing lava tag, right? Because or the sort of floor is lava, I should say. Because you're trying to entertain yourself inside. Obviously, there's things like TV and video games. Oh, have to stay inside. That's fun. Plumbing. Indoor plumbing. I love it. Quarantined. That's a good one. Oh, yeah. Very relevant right now. Maybe this is a bad topic because it's depressing right now. These are great. Blanket forts. Oh, my God. I love it. Blanket forts. Oh, yeah. That's cool. Anything else that you think of when you think of indoor?
Candles.
Candles. Ooh, I like that. Lighting, just like lighting. Womp womp. What is that? Is that an indoor thing? I don't get it. I don't get the womp womp one. Sorry, Denny. Okay, so next, let's do another one. Love. No, that's too general. Banquet. Let's do that. Banquet. So now we're having a banquet. What do you think of banquet? I think of fancy. I think of lots of food. Potluck. Houseplants. Is that for indoor or for banquet? I think that's for indoor, right?
Presumably for indoor, yeah.
I think that's for indoor. Yeah. Okay. Potluck. Anything else for all you can eat? Fun. Fun. What else would you have at a banquet? Kind of like a celebration. Maybe you have some like nobles or royalty are showing up at this banquet. Maybe you have like a big roast boar or something. I guess I'm thinking of asterisks. Any other ideas for a banquet? A chandelier. That's fun.
I was gonna say I always think of a giant table when I think of a banquet, a big spread of food.
Oh yeah, giant table, spread of people, like that long table that you think
Yeah.
of. That's a lot of fun. I like that. Okay, so we have these two themes. Let's just do one more for fun. Physics. Oh boy, that's too general too. Mastermind. Okay, let's do that. What do you think of when you have a mastermind? Okay, so with a mastermind, definitely like, evil lair, right? Might be something like, computer room, controlling from afar. I guess it's kind of evil lair. Evil, yes, I love it. We think of, intelligence, of course, mastery. I think of like, this person is like thinking of everything like a chess game, kind of your Lelouch or, light characters, right? Those kinds of tropes of this person is so smart that they everything is a game to them.
Puzzle
You think
solving.
of controlling lots of people. Sorry, what did he say, Noah?
Puzzle solving.
Puzzle solving, yeah. I guess there's a little bit of a power fantasy going on here, right? If you're a mastermind, most likely, um, everyone else is kind of monologue trope. Oh, I love it. So they have that trope of like the mastermind has to give a big monologue, to kind of announce their big plans. Oh, that's so great. Anything else? Okay, laser sharks. Okay, let me throw that in. Cool. Okay, so there is a little bit of a delay. I apologize, everybody. So when I see the chat, it's like 3 seconds later or so. So we have these few different concepts. We have indoor. Oh, let me stop scrolling. Okay, we have indoor, banquet, and mastermind, and we're going to try and come up with a game concept. Remember, a game concept has to have a goal and it has to have conflict, right? So we can use any one of these starting points, things that are basically interesting to us, things that we thought of when we thought of these words, to jump off and make a really simple game. And it's going to be a really simple game. So just going off of this, kind of off the top of my head, I'm going to start with indoor. And I'm also going to be thinking in my head of what are things I could actually make. So one would be, floor is lava would be some kind of simple avoidance game, where you want to stay on the furniture, right? And not fall down or something like that. That would be pretty easy to make. I don't know. Plumbing is a lot of things you could do with plumbing. Quarantined is, I don't want to do that. It's depressing. Blanket forts. What would you do with blanket forts? Maybe you have some kind of, like I'm thinking like pillow and blanket forts, right? So maybe you, take pillows and build forts against imaginary monsters. This is like our tower defense sort of thing, right? Maybe you build a fort to invite others into it. It's hard to kind of frame that as a game, right? Candles and lighting. This could be a simple sort of, place candles in each of the windows of your house, right? You want to make your house pretty. I'm thinking of like decorating the house for, for a company or for a holiday, just that nice sort of decoration. What's that word? Hygge? I can't say it. The Danish word. Hygge something. I know I butchered that word. Keep the houseplants alive. Collect water. I like that. Keep the houseplants alive. Collect water. Love it. Okay, I think these are all viable ideas. I'm going to highlight them. Banquet. I'm actually going to just get rid of mastermind because I don't want to, spend too much time on this. I want to get to the actual building. So banquet. We've got fancy, lots of food, potluck. Oh, thank you for the spelling of Hygge. Oh boy, here we go. Right. Okay. Banquet, fancy, lots of food, potluck. Any of these things ringing a bell for a goal and conflict? So it could definitely have some kind of light the chandelier. Swing on the chandelier. I don't know why. When I see a chandelier, I really want to swing on it. Finding your place in the table, right? Big, intimidating table. Setting the table. That could be kind of fun. Run around the table to deliver food to everyone at a certain time. I love it. It's like a diner dash kind of thing. Run around table to deliver food to everyone within a certain time. We could definitely do that. Collecting specific foods. Fun. And anything else? Okay, let's move forward. So I think we'll choose from one of these and we'll build a game. So just off the top of my head, I think that this could definitely work. I'm going to bold that. I'm going to say this can definitely work. This can definitely work. Is this the same thing? I think it's the same thing. Collect water to keep the houseplants alive, right? That could definitely work. Run around the table. That's a good example of something that's proven, right? I mean, we have Diner Dash. That's fun. But what's kind of a little different about it is like you are running around this big long table. So that kind of feels a little bit different than Diner Dash, but it's also familiar, right? I don't know exactly how to do these at the top of my head. Specific foods might be like people are, does that mean like they're done with their food? Does that mean like you're trying to collect food for the banquet? Is that what that means? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I do like it. Cool. I think I'm going to eliminate this one. Let's go with one of these three. Do we have a vote? Avoidance, stay in the furniture, keep the houseplants alive, run around to deliver food. Anyone want to vote for one of these three concepts? Giving it a second for the delay. Houseplants.
I'm on houseplants too.
Houseplants. Okay. Anyone else? Houseplants. Okay, we have a game. So we have solidify your concept. So our goal is to keep the houseplants alive. Let's say for time t, right? And then at the end, you're going to be essentially, scored. Ugh, why is that not working? Oh, that's why. Scored for at the end. Scored for number of plants / aliveness, something like that. Okay. We have like a set of plants in a row. That's pretty simple. They are growing and dying, right? And they're kind of like little meters, I guess, in a way, right? Oh, wow. Everyone voted houseplants. Cool. We're going with houseplants. That's great. Set of plants in a row, they're growing and dying. Maybe there's like 0% to 100%. Okay. And when you add water, they grow for a little bit and start to die for a little bit. They start to die, actually. I'll just put that. And then what you want to do is add water to start the growth process, right? Essentially, the water is lasting for a little bit of time to help the plant stay alive, and it's going to grow and die, and you have to maintain all the different plants and keep an eye on which ones. They may or may not have different hidden properties. This is a reach, I'm going to say. Reach ideas, because we may not have time to do this. Different plants have different properties, right? For essentially their growth rate, right? Death rate. So that'd be kind of interesting. What else would be interesting? Any ideas people want to shout out or type out, I should say? Ooh, that sounds cool. Specific amounts of water. Oh, wow. Water and light. Yes, definitely a reach. But now I'm realizing that we do need some level of like, water as a resource. It's kind of scarce, right? Does it fill over time? Do you have a bucket and you need to refill it? Maybe you have to like super fast click a spigot or something. I don't know why you would super fast click a spigot, but you do have to super fast click a spigot to fill the bucket. And then once the bucket's full, you can click on plants to water them. That could work. Okay, we've got a lot of things to go with, right? So why don't we, this is the kind of thing where the risks are hard because there's not that many risks when you're just building a little game jam game. But if we were to pretend for a second that we were building this into a full game, what would some risks be, right? Oh, I like the old fashioned water idea. That's fun. Old fashioned water pump. Leaky plumbing. Oh yeah, someone said plumbing earlier. We could put it all together. I love it. Cool. So risks. What are some risks here? I mean, I think complexity is one of them. We have a lot of different ideas. We want it to be kind of simple enough to understand, to understand. Ideally, there should be some tension, but not like hopeless. right? That's going to be a hard thing. This game seems like it requires a little bit of balance to be fun. And that is a risk in and of itself, is that it'd be easy for us to make this game and just for it to be totally unfair in how hard it is. In fact, that's what I expect to happen. I expect it to be very unfair, or super easy, right? Oh yeah, repetition, boredom. That's a good one. You know, too much of doing the same thing. This is great. Okay. And then we're going to set clear goals. You know, it kind of is the same thing as your risks reversed, right? You know, your goals are, you have things like, you know, you want it to be fun and tense throughout. Maybe some strategy. That would be cool. Be pretty hard to get in this small amount of time. Other design goals would be, you know, definitely succeeds in invoking the theme. Cool. Choose the right tool. That's Unity. We already decided that. Ugh. This is a throwaway prototype. All these things we can kind of just sort of just assume we're doing those things, right? Minimize polish. We're about to get to this part. We're about to do the fail fast part, right? I guess we'll show an example of minimizing polish because it is not going to be polished. Cool. Any questions before we jump in? Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to open up Unity. We're going to see how this goes. It's going to be interesting to say the least, right? So I'm going to make ourselves a little sort of plant of some kind. Plant. I'm going to make it a square for now because don't really want to make art for it just yet. Square. We'll make it green because of course it's green. Let's see where our square is. Seems to be outside of the camera. Oh, it's in the camera. That's interesting. So why can't we see it? We've already got a bug, everybody. That is very strange. Is it just too small? Nope, that's not it. Is it too big? Oh, it had a Z for some reason. That's weird. Okay, so now we're good. We can bring this back down to being something of a plant. This is a little harsh looking, so I'm going to make this white so it's a little easier, or like a grayish just for now. Did we say that we're indoors? Yeah, we're indoors, so we might have to come back to that later. Let's move our plant down here. We want our plant to have some properties, right? So let's do that. Oh boy, I made a lowercase. I don't know why I did that. That was an accident. We're going to say public int health, right? And that's going to be essentially how good it's doing. It's usually going to be 1 to 100. So that's a pretty straightforward concept. It has like a starting health. It'll probably be 50, right? And then we can have say something like public void water plant. And that's going to add some amount, heal amount, right, to the health. Health plus equals heal amount. And we can say if health, you know, if health is greater than or equal greater than 100, health equals 100, right? And then we can have some kind of public void die a little. And this is going to be essentially, we'll do the same thing. Int death amount, okay? And this is going to be health minus equals death amount, okay? And then if health is less than 0 or less than equal to 0, then I'm so sorry, we have to destroy it. Okay, so we have a plant now that can starts at 50 health. This is a basic plant. We're probably not going to get to plant types, but I hope we do. We can water it and we can let it die a little. And I think probably we need some kind of coroutine, right? That will call it. I'm actually going to do it the lazy way because I'm blanking at the moment. Oh no, yeah, we could do a coroutine. Why don't we do what is it? IEnumerator. IEnumerator. I'm blanking on the exact way to do this, of course, at this moment. Noah, can you shout it out? How do you do a coroutine?
Yeah, you're on the right track. You
Yeah.
can make a function from here.
Yeah, something like that, right? Is it
Yep.
that simple? Oh, wow. Routine, coroutine, and then it could be die a little, right? And this needs a yield return. Yield wait for seconds. Let's just say 2 for now. What is this supposed to be? The engine that wait for seconds.
I think you just need a new keyword.
Oh yeah, new. Good call. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to say something like public int death delay equals 2. Actually, I want it to be a float. Cool. And we could say that's our death delay. And then it's just going to literally do something like this because why not? And we can just say, okay, it's just dying a little every single time. We could say something like public int gradual death, or I don't know what you'd call it, death amount equals 2. Probably too easy, but let's just try it. Die a little, death amount, like that. Great. So while it's true, it's going to start this coroutine, and it's just going to keep every death delay seconds, which right now is 2 by default. Is every 2 seconds, it's just going to die a little bit. Okay, that's lovely. We're going to also reflect the health somehow in its, why don't we say its size? That could be kind of fun, right? Maybe we can say when it's 5 tall. Oh boy. When it's 5 tall, it is going to be like, or we could say opacity. It's going to be really vague, huh? If anyone has thoughts, feel free to shout them out. I think size probably makes the most sense, right? Like if it's a plant, it's growing. It's not really how watering plants works, but I mean, it's good as an abstraction, I think. So we have this plant, it's dying slowly. Let's just make sure that actually works before we go forward. So we should see the health going down over time gradually. It is not yet going down, and that could be because, oh, die attack couldn't be started. That's probably why. Die a little. And it's actually because I named these two things the same thing. So I'm going to call this keep dying. And these are the worst names ever. There we go.
You can also start a coroutine by calling the function inside of the parentheses instead of putting a string. Just a fun trick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like just like this?
With parentheses after, yeah.
Good to know. I learned something today. Yay! So now that should work. We should have a dying plant, which probably wasn't the most Huga thing to start with a dying plant, but cool. It's working. The health is going down. Cool. And it's going to be hard to see that though, right? So we're going to have to find a way to visualize that somehow. Maybe the best way is a number, let's be honest. Yeah. So we have our plant. I'm going to take off for a second. I had this from an older game that I was working on, that you die after a certain amount of time. Probably have to bring that back actually in a second. Just kidding. Let's keep it because we want to keep these plants alive for a certain amount of time. I just need to set it to something like 60 seconds, a minute, right? So we want to keep the plants alive for the 60 seconds that you have, and you're going to get scored based on the number of plants that the health of all your relative plants. That seems pretty straightforward. I'm going to add a box collider to each of these, and we're going to give it a trigger, and we're going to add to this script public void on mouse down, and we're going to say, right now I'm just going to apply the water plant, but eventually we're going to come up with a way to, apply the water conditionally. So why don't we say water the plant 5? So this is definitely really easy right now, but that's okay. And when you tap, this means that when you click on the plant, you are watering it. And by watering it, you are increasing its health by 5 up to its max of 10. So let's just make sure that works real quick. So it's going down gradually. Click, click. I can keep going. I can take it all the way to 100. It won't go above 100. Oh, it looks like it actually doesn't even go to 100. That's funny. Or does it? It does go to 100. Maybe it has to be even. What did I do there? Greater than 100, health equals 100. Oh, yeah, I guess it worked. Weird. Okay, cool. So that works. You can water plants by clicking on them. Fantastic. I am going to go ahead and turn this into a prefab now. So this is our plant. And we can actually have, let's just say, multiple plants. Okay, that should be enough for now. We have our little plants. I'm feeling a little sad that it doesn't look like anything like a plant, so I'm just going to add a little flower on top. This is going to be a great little flower. Let's make it purple because I made purple flowers for 9 recently, and I guess that's in my head. It looks like it needs to be bigger. Oh, it needs an actual sprite. That would explain a lot. Oh, man. Is it because this has a 5 scale? It is because it has the 5 scale. That's funny. So this needs to be 2. This could be 1 and 5. That is funny. Too funny. Okay. That is really janky, but it'll have to do. We'll do something like that. And we'll say that is in front. And there we go. It's a flower, right? Right? Yeah. We can make this yellow. So this is where actually using a sprite might have actually been even quicker, right? Because I could have done other things than what I'm doing right now. But it's fine. This will have to do. Okay, it's beautiful, right? Minimum polish, right? That's what we said. Oh, jeez. Okay, I'm just gonna do this real quick and just do that, and then I could spread these out a little bit. Fantastic. Any comments so far? Thoughts? While I'm rearranging the plants, which is not something I should be doing right now, but that's okay. Cool. It's so easy to get attached, even to when things are this ugly. You get attached to them and you want them to survive. It's just a thing. So we need a way to visualize that the plants are dying. We can either, thank you, Denny. Thank you. Oh boy, there's a lot coming from you. We can either make them scale up and down. We can make the flower head phase away. One thing that occurred to me is that if the scale decreased as it died, it would make it harder the worse you were doing. That's true, isn't it? It would be harder to click on it because you would have a smaller target. That is a very good point. That's kind of cool because it's like this sort of positive feedback loop, right? Where the game gets harder as you're losing and easier as you're winning. Very, very good point. Should we do that then? Should we do it the scale way? Negative loop. What? Well, it is negative in the fact that it's bad for you, but it'd be positive feedback loop in the sense that, yeah, it's a positive feedback loop because it is an enforcing relationship, right? But yeah, it is negative in that it is bad for you, the player, in that sense. So you're both right. So let's just see what it looks like if I shrink these. It's going to look really janky, but it is definitely getting harder. That's for sure. So why don't we actually just run with it, right? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So we're gonna say we're gonna give this plant a kind of start scale, right? Um, you know, uh, start scale. And I guess actually this means that it's going to start shrinked because we're starting at 50 health, right? Maybe we shouldn't do that. They go to start scale of 5, and we're just going to play with the Y scale because I think it's a little too much otherwise. And what we're going to do is every time we update our health, what I really want is a health method, don't I? Yeah, I do. Um, that would be the smart way to do it, but it's too late, so I'm not doing it that way. Instead, I'm just going to do an update. It doesn't need to be public. Just update scaling. Okay, and we're just going to match the scaling to the health, right? A flower pot that keeps its size. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Whoops. So we're going to have our health essentially, and our health is 1 to 100, right? So we can use that as a means to scale the thing. We can basically say, how much is the health out of 100? We have this kind of float current scale equals that relative amount, that percentage, times, what is it called again? Our start scale y. So it's going to be whatever that percentage of 100 times start scale y, and then we can apply that scale transform dot, what is it, set scale, local scale. That's fine. Do I have to do a vector? Probably have to do a vector. Is it a vector? It is a vector. We did it. Okay. And we just do transform dot local scale dot x, and then we can do current scale. It's really more like a new scale, isn't it? That should be a 2. Okay, we're good. And so now let's just see. It's going to start flat probably. It's going to look really weird, I think. But let's just see what happens. Save. And they should be slowly shrinking, right? Unless I mess something up, which is possible. Oh, I have to actually grab the scale, I think, because it's just the one transform. No, that should still work. Oh, I need to call the method. That would probably be my problem. Okay, when you die a little, we're gonna call the method. And when you heal, we're gonna call the method. That should fix our problem. Oh boy, what have I done? 0 scale. That's interesting. Probably because I didn't set. This is part of game development, right? No, we did set start scale. What am I missing? This is a good debugging time, right? Health at 100, that's our fraction. Our health should be between 1 and 100, which we've made sure of. Start scale y is the kind of new thing that we're going for. Is it because local scale is not the right thing?
You're dividing 2 integers. I think you're going to get a rounded result.
Good call. So would I do something like this? Right? And then this would have to be like a float.
I think if one of them is float, it'll do the...
Great catch. I hate that type stuff. I think that's probably what the problem was. Thank goodness I have you, Noah. What do I do without you? There we go. It should be gradually getting smaller. Are they still going down? Yeah, they are gradually getting smaller. It's just really slow. Okay, cool. And then if I click it, it should get bigger again. We're watering our flowers, right? Okay, so this kind of tells me that we thank you. We need to probably increase this a little bit. I'm going to make this 1, and I'm going to make this 4. This might be crazy now, but let's just see. Okay, now we've got a game. Cool. So we've got 60 seconds. That one's dead. I already lost one, and I'm not even like filling up water yet. This is just a click flowers to keep them alive game. It's a game, right? And now we just need a way for this to all contribute to your score. Your score could be like a running total of all the plants, I suppose. And what it can do is it can essentially we could just have references, I suppose, to all the plants. That's probably the easiest way to do this. Public plant. Oh my God, I made it lowercase. I hate myself for doing that. You know, plants. Oh my God, this would actually be private. Nope, public. Just kidding. And we're just gonna essentially query for them and use it to update the score. So we're going to. This is pretty expensive, but that's okay. I guess I could also do update score, something like this. Public void update score. And what'll happen is every time plant updates its scaling, this is not a normal way of doing this, but it's okay. We can just also update the score, right? And we could just send it its health. Health. Something like that. I think that should work. Oh no, we should just let it keep querying. That first idea was better. Update the score. That way, so it's not happening like every single frame. It's just happening, on every tick of that coroutine, which I think is better. So when we update the score, we're going to essentially go through all of the plants for each plant P in plants. If P is not equal to null, because we can actually destroy them, right? They can die. This is what we have to do. We have to do an int score, current score equals 0. And we're going to do current score plus equals P dot health. And then we can express that score. Score text dot text equals, I just do what I did here. This is what I want to do. Yeah, I don't even need a current score because actually, I should probably do that just to be safe. Score equals current score. Okay, so now we should have a running total, if I did this right, we'll see, of our score updating gradually as the flowers shrink and grow. By the way, I like to think this is considered a game. So we've done our initial goal. It's not yet working. Let's see what I did wrong. So we have our text. That's good. The reference is there. Score text is there. Score is staying 0. So that means this is staying 0. Is this being called? Let's make sure. It is in fact being called. This is what happens when you do things quick and sloppy, right? Is that you lose track of what you're doing. So we have a current score. If P is not null, we have to actually set the plants array. Of course. See, normally when you're making games, you are a little less sloppy to at least point where you do things in something resembling, I just learned that you can do this. Amazing that it has taken me, I've been using Unity for like a long time, and I only just learned that you can do that. And oh, shoot. That's crazy that I went that long manually dragging in lists. Oh, what is my life? Okay, let's do this. Okay, so our score is going down. If I increase one thing, our plant comes back to life. Oh my. So actually, there's actually a good amount of conflict here because I have to kind of balance these, even without our water idea. So even without our extra features, we had a lot more feature ideas. We had ideas of plant properties. We had ideas of, filling a bucket of water, which we didn't really get to, but that's okay. There is something here. It is pretty furious to try and keep all of this stuff going. There's no strategy at the moment because the plants are all the same. So I would say that's probably the only thing is that you don't get a sense of like differentiation. The game would be different based only on which ones I click first, right? So just make sure this all works. I think when the time hits 0, oops, let me keep some alive at least. We should get a final score based on whatever our score is. Ooh. Okay, 210. We did it. It's a game. So we try to keep the plants alive for 60 seconds. That was probably a little too long. I'm going to make it 30 seconds. And that is the goal of this game. Keep the plants alive. Some features we could add with more time would be things like the water filling up a bucket of water and having a limited amount of water to use. It could be the ideas people had of plant properties. Different plants act differently, and therefore, you have to kind of treat them differently, perhaps. Maybe one can get too much water. What if you can overwater something? Oh boy, that's crazy. But yeah, I think that we got something that we failed fast, right? We got to an endpoint that told us this is something that is, fun enough to keep going forward with if we wanted to. Um, if you like this concept of fast clicking and like that sort of tension, um, you could change the style of the game too. If we increased all those strategic elements we talked about, we can also slow down the whole game and make it more of a strategy game. But right now, with no depth, it kind of has to be this Twitch game to have any conflict, right? So it's almost like the simplicity is forcing us to be Twitch driven, if that makes sense. Um, that's what I think I've learned. I'm just gonna put that. Um, minimize polish. Looks like a flower. Ish. Denny said it's pretty. Woot. And then fail fast. Like I said, things that I learned. What we learned is that simplicity forces us to be Twitch based. Other feature ideas we discussed could make this a slower strategy game. Anything else? Did anyone learn anything? Or was this not a learning experience? I hope so. Comments, thoughts? I'll give the chat a second to respond. That's good to hear because I wasn't sure if I knew what I was doing. Thank you, David, for the coding help. I appreciate it. And I liked your scale idea because it did actually make it harder. It would, if we had done X scale 2, that might have even made it even harder. And if the game was faster, it would be crazy hard because then scale is like a big problem. If these were moving flowers, forget it. It'd be like crazy hard. And the scale would be a big factor, I think, if it was a moving target. But even without them moving, it made a difference. I had to aim differently. Anything else? I agree with Adam, the creator. A flower pot would have been a good idea. Because then the flower pot would let it still look kind of like a flower. And if we had given it a bottom anchor, that would have been good too. Because then we could have scaled it down to that. In fact, while I'm waiting for someone, if anyone has any more questions, let me just quickly, I think you could just add that here, right? Could do that. Polygon somewhere here. I thought. Was I wrong? It's because it's that. That's why. Bottom. Apply. Oh yeah, that's good. Then, oh, it still wouldn't work because the center is off. Oh well, what are you gonna do, right? Essentially have to like move the whole thing up. Oh boy, that's pretty crazy. I gave myself a little bit of a a world of hurt here by doing it this way and like changing it after the fact. But it does work. Let's just see if that solves our problem. Yep, that solved the problem. Cool. We did it. We made a game. Well, that's it. I mean, trying to think. Oh yeah, recommendations to practice. So on an existing project, if you haven't already, start rapid prototyping, pick a tool and start moving. Have you prototyped the riskiest parts of your design, or are you spending lots of time on tried and true gameplay? Are you hitting diminishing returns? Is it time to shift direction? So just really keep an eye on that. Some other ways to practice, of course, participate in game jams. I've been really getting into 1 hour game jams lately. They're silly, but they're not as big of a time commitment, and you're forced to do what I just did, right? Make something really strange in a small amount of time. There, of course, the traditional game jams, which are 24 or 48 hours. Highly recommended because they give you the constraints. They give you a theme. You are often forced into a tool by your teammates. Those constraints help you come up with ideas. Challenge yourself to a new prototype a week or month. Actually, Ayla did this. How many weeks were y'all doing prototypes every Friday? It was a lot, right?
Yeah, there was a time there I think where we had weekly. Right now we're at a bi-weekly cadence.
Still though, how many prototypes have you done that way, like game jams?
We do 2 game jams a month. I can't count that off the top of my head, but
Okay,
I think we have over 40 now prototypes.
wow. Okay, so over 40, and that probably you guys have really built your tools around that, which is fantastic. That's the way to do it. Wow, I got to do that. Cool. And if there's any other questions, yeah, I think we're just about done. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Yep, we can wait a few more minutes just in case there's any additional questions.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm actually curious since you're on the channel. Um, you know, how much did that line up with the philosophy that Ayla developed while doing your prototypes?
I think there's a lot of it that I found overlaps with what we already do. And there's also, of course, a lot of takeaways that we can apply into our own process. I think I really like your formalized numbered step process for each prototype. We've kind of clawed our way through to that, but we had to develop. We never really followed a specific formula, so we kind of developed the follow through after a prototype and the evaluation that we do and the questions that we ask before and after prototypes.
That makes sense.
But having even a little bit more of a focusing list from the outset to say, here are the steps that I'm going to go through, and keeping in mind the next step while you're maybe actively developing the prototype. What questions are you really trying to answer right now?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And for what it's worth, in all honesty, I developed these steps as I thought about my process. It's not that I so much consciously went through every step every time. A lot of these are internalized, and a lot of times I combine them. Like I said with the DJ Scratch one, I was given that concept, the starting point, right? So I couldn't just be like, oh, start with curiosity, because that was like,
Right.
here's your starting point. So however, in a perfect world, when you have infinite time, I would try to go through something resembling these steps, I think. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that the DJ Scratch origin story kind of resonated with me as well, because we're both kind of in the same space. A lot of hyper casual games often just come from, okay, well, what if we took one game and then what if we just added this small nudge spin on it, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, right, because you live in that world of hyper casual, so that's
Right,
even more so, keeping everything super simple, like to an extreme.
right, right,
Like all those features we discussed just now would be probably too much for a lot of casual games, or at least they'd have to be unlocked over time or something, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
We have
Cool.
a question here. Any tips for identifying when you're getting to that point of diminishing returns?
Oh my, it's this is the hardest thing. I feel like, the sooner you can leave it, the better. I would say the moment you're like, writing one-off functions and like, I mean, the stuff that I was doing in this was special because it was like a 20, it was like a 30-minute prototype, right? So I was extremely sloppy. But if you're making a longer term project, you want to at least keep yourself organized. You want to at least know what your functions are doing. It's nice to stop every now and then and write some comments if you haven't been doing it as you go. Once you like need to ask other programmers on your team, especially if in your team, what is going on here? Where can I find this thing? And you're supposed to still be prototyping. The project is still small. You've gone too far already. You want to stop sooner, um, before things get tangled. I'm trying to think of how do you know that it's tangled in a. This is something that I think is just more. I mean, you have a lot of coding experience, Sal, so you know this, but um, when you're kind of like thinking backwards and there's no logical structure. uh, Unfortunately, this is also subjective because everyone has a different way of thinking about code. But if maybe the lead engineer does not have like a clear structure or communicated structure, or if there just is no structure because there's no lead engineer, that's usually a bad sign, right? Um, I hope that made sense. Another way, actually, a better way to answer that is that you're past the point of diminishing returns when it feels like it's taking too long to make a change. I think it's a simple way of thinking of it. Like, you know, your boss asks you for something, or you think of a new feature to add, and it's something like adding a new piece of text, or like, changing some properties. And like, it would be easy if you started from scratch, but because you have this code base, it's like a huge headache. That's too much for a small prototype. That's normal in giant applications because they're giant and complicated, but it's not okay for a small prototype. Good question.
I think we're ready to move to wrap up.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you so much. Don't really have anything more to add. Thank you for the wonderful questions. This was a lot of fun.
Uh, yeah. So, Ro, just real quick, you mentioned that the slides will be linked in the YouTube description and Discord.
Yeah, I'll put all those together into one place, maybe Google Drive or something, and I'll link them from Discord, and I'll pass you the link so you can include it in the YouTube. And I guess this video gets saved to Twitch too, right?
Yeah, it gets saved to Twitch as well, but we will be archiving it permanently on our YouTube channel, which was already linked earlier in the chat. And if you join the Discord, there'll be a notification there.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I will definitely do that.
And if you haven't seen our archives, those have been linked. This one will be there soon.
Yep.
I think it's usually within a couple days. Thank you so much again, Ro. And if people did want to follow up with you kind of after this talk and ask any questions, where's a good place for people to contact?
Definitely Twitter. I guess if the screen share is still going, let me just show the final slide. My Twitter is @RSC390. Why don't I also post it in the Twitter chat? I mean, sorry, the Twitch chat. Twitter is definitely like the public-facing way to reach me. I am also very regular on the Rock Game Dev Discord, so you can always find me there. I'm all over the place there, so and you can ask me whatever you want.
And if you're not already in our Discord, you absolutely should be, if that's not enough of a convincing factor.
Yeah, do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.